delegitimization under the cover of international human rights, humanitarian, and criminal law. The phenomenon of universal jurisdiction is only one expression of it. Ironically enough, Israel was the first to exercise a universal jurisdiction in the Eichmann case. Now it is the target of sustained selective applications of universal jurisdiction to it. The third, laundering under the cover of human rights, of which the UN Human Rights Council is a case study. I've made reference to it, but one particular egregious thing which I witnessed being there. If you look at the UN Human Rights Council whenever it meets, as it did this week, it has a permanent agenda item, item 7, which says human rights violations by Israel in the occupied Palestinian territory. Item 8 says human rights violations in the rest of the world. In other words, there is a country-specific indictment of one member state in the international community, and Alice in Wonderland framing where the conviction is secured even before the hearings begin. All that is left is the sentence, and that's where Goldstone comes in. Goldstone is a creature, and it may not be known, of Article 7. Goldstone reported under Article 7. Goldstone proceeded under a resolution which predetermined the outcome of the mission itself, let alone the composition of that mission, where each of the people had themselves pronounced themselves on the issues before them, even before they began their inquiry. In any other case, not only would they have to recuse themselves, they could not initially even been named to the tribunal. Number 4, the laundering of delegitimization under the struggle against racism. Nobody wants to be seen to be a racist. If you call somebody a racist, the very label supplies the indictment. This particular dynamic reached its apex in Durban 1, which has become a metaphor for laundering of delegitimization under the protective cover of the struggle against racism. It's moved on from there not only to boycotts, divestments, and sanctions, but beyond that, and this is another protective cover as well. And you have, of course, the laundering of this lawfare of delegitimization under the protective cover of free speech to actually silence speech, of which more will be spoken. So let me just conclude by saying the following, that while lawfare is finding increasing expression in the laundering of delegitimization under the cover of law, in the singling out of one member state in the international community for differential and discriminatory treatment and the denial of international due process to it. And I'm deliberately speaking in juridical terms because that's what lawfare is all about, and it proceeds under juridical rubrics, as I said. The real prejudice and the real threat is not simply, to Israel, though there is, for reasons that I have been referring to, that threat. The real threat is that which brings us together today. And that is, and with this I go back to where I began, that what is at stake and should concern us, if lawfare is the waging of war, the war of delegitimization under the cover of law and legal institutions, what should concern us is, number 1, the undermining of the integrity of the UN. We're about to commemorate the 65th anniversary of the United Nations Charter, which speaks up, among other things, of the equality of all nations, large and small. What is happening to those founding ideals and principles? It diminishes the authority of international law, and when you have selective prosecutions of the manner in which they are being imposed and applied, that undermines international law. That undermines that which the United States, in fact, and being here in the United States, was at the forefront of being there. And I agree with everything that Nicholas said in his opening remarks with respect to taking back the juridical narrative in that regard, not simply being the defendant in the docket, but becoming the plaintiff with respect to the whole question of the legal revolution and the like. It corrupts the struggle for human rights and those principles of the human rights revolution that Father Robert Dryden spoke about. And it insults and assaults the genuine struggle against racism. And I speak as someone who was involved in, and as many here, in the anti-apartheid struggle to make that kind of slanderous analogy between Israel and the real apartheid. And so I trust that the discourse and the dialogue of this conference will move us from lawfare, F-A-R-E, to lawfare, F-A-I-R, and to the history and hopes of the human rights revolution of of which Father Robert Joynan spoke so eloquently some 20 years ago. Thank you.